sound came first, muffled yet insistent, like the slow pull of a tide inside my own chest. It wasn't the sea outside that terrified me, it was the sea within the walls. I remember standing there, flashlight trembling, hearing water crash against a basement door, not from the shore, but from below, from the belly of the lighthouse itself. And in that moment, I knew something was terribly wrong. The ocean had found a way in. Or maybe it had always been here, waiting. We had on tea, even been on the island a full hour when I first felt it, that strange current under my skin. A whisper that the sea doesn't like to be caged. The three of us, Lucas, Aaron, and me, had come to document this forgotten lighthouse for our independent project. We called it exploration, but really it was obsession. Chasing abandoned places the world had tried to bury. A lighthouse swallowed by salt and silence felt perfect. From the boat, the structure had looked like a broken tooth jutting from the gums of the island. Up close, it was worse. The tower leaned slightly, scarred by storms, its bricks bleeding rust and moss. Shattered windows were black sockets staring out to sea. The smell of brine and corroded iron clung to everything, thick enough to taste. Aaron laughed nervously, saying it was like walking into the ribcage of some drowned beast. I thought she was right. We hauled our gear through wet sand, gulls circling above like restless thoughts. The island was smaller than I expected, more reef than landmass. A ring of jagged rocks surrounded it, breaking the surf into constant froth. Nothing grew here, not even weeds. It felt less like a place and more like a wound the ocean refused to heal. Inside, the lighthouse was a hollow organ. Every footstep echoed, reverberating as though the walls were listening. Paint peeled in long strips, curling like seaweed. The air was damp, metallic, alive. I ran my hand along one wall and felt moisture slick my fingertips, though we were nowhere near the tide line. Lucas muttered that the whole structure was a lung filling with seawater. He wasn't wrong. We set up camp on the ground floor. Cameras, tripods, battery packs, the skeleton of our project. Lucas checked audio levels while Aaron tested the drone. I wandered, drawn by the silence beneath the noise of waves outside. That was when I saw it. A stain on the wall. Dark and wet. About 2 meters up. Too high for seawater. I traced it with my eyes, imagining the tide climbing like invisible fingers, leaving its mark where no tide should reach. By nightfall, the lighthouse seemed to breathe around us. The wind moved through its cracks, in low sighs. We cooked instant noodles on a portable stove, steam mixing with the salt-heavy air. Aaron joked about ghost ships and sirens. Lucas scoffed, though his voice shook. I barely spoke. My mind was on the walls, on that wet trace glistening where the sea should never touch. When the generator hummed to life and our lamps flickered on, I felt a false comfort. The kind sailors must feel before the storm swallows them whole. We filmed introductions, voices echoing like calls across water. Then the first sound came low, rhythmic, unmistakable. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the waves. It was the unmistakable crash of surf, but from underneath. As if the belly of the lighthouse contained its own ocean. We froze. Aaron muted her laugh mid-sentence. Lucas tilted his head, eyes narrowing. The sound came again. Water colliding with stone. Too close. Too wrong. My heart raced like a trapped fish. I wanted to believe it was pipes, echoes, some trick of architecture, but I knew. The sound was tidal, steady, patient. Aaron lifted her camera, whispering, "Tell me you hear that." I nodded. My throat was dry. It's inside. We followed the sound, lights cutting through dust and shadows, until we reached a locked hatch in the floor. Metal rusted green, hinges swollen with age. From beneath it came the surf's heartbeat. Each crash made the hatch shudder, as though something was knocking from below. Lucas reached for the padlock, then hesitated. "No way the tide reaches here," he whispered. "We're meters above sea level." I leaned down, pressed my ear to the hatch. Cold seeped into my skin. Behind the metal, the ocean roared distant and near at once, and mixed in, faint but real, was another sound. like breath, like something exhaling against the other side. That night, none of us slept. The waves outside pounded the rocks in rhythm with the waves inside. I lay awake on the damp floor, staring at cracks in the ceiling. In my head, the lighthouse wasn't stone at all. It was bone, marrow, hollowed by tides, and we were inside its skull, listening to the brainwater slosh. I wondered if we'd already gone too far, if by stepping onto this island we'd been claimed, like driftwood swallowed into a riptide. The sea has many faces. That night, I saw one pressed against the walls. The passage sloped deeper, like a throat swallowing us whole. The walls glistened, slick and alive, and every drop that fell echoed as if we were inside some hollow whale. Its ribcage turned to stone. Lucas went first, his lamp bobbing like a buoy in a black tide. Erin followed, recording, her light shaking with each step. I brought up the rear, carrying the second camera, my every instinct screaming that we should turn back. But curiosity is a current, and it dragged us forward. We reached a point where the tunnel widened, forming a shallow pool that stretched across the floor. The water was ink dark, rippling without source, as though stirred by some deep breath exhaled far below. Lucas crouched and tested it with his boot, muttering, "Not that deep." But his words sounded hollow, stripped of certainty. He knelt, pushing the lamp forward until its glow fractured across the water's skin. I swear the reflection blinked back. Erin's voice cracked through the silence. Battery check. Cameras at 60%. She was grounding herself in process, clinging to routine like a sailor clings to rope in a storm. But I saw her hands, clenched tight, kunoklis pale. The water was rising, inch by inch, though there was no tide here, no opening to the sea, only stone, only darkness. Lucas insisted on going ahead. "I'll just check where this leads," he said, voice firm but eyes restless, darting like fish in a net. Before we could argue, he was wading into the pool, lamp swaying, water rippling outward in perfect rings. I filmed him, my throat dry, his figure bent and distorted in the camera's screen, as if the lens itself were submerged. Every step he took sounded distant, muffled, like hearing through seawater. He reached the far side, where the tunnel narrowed again into black. He crouched, adjusting his light, squinting into the throat of shadow. Then his body stiffened. He turned back to us, face pale, mouth open. A sound tore from him, muffled, strangled, like someone screaming underwater. My blood froze. Erin shouted his name. Her voice came back to us warped, reverberating in ways stone shouldn't allow. Lucas stumbled, arms flailing, the lamp splashing into the water. Ripples spread like panic itself, racing across the pool toward us. He cried out again, a gurgling shout cut short before he vanished into the dark throat of the tunnel. Not vanished like walking, vanished like pulled. We splashed forward, water biting at our shins, but he was gone. The tunnel ahead swallowed light, swallowed sound. Erin's camera shook wildly as she tried to steady it. "Lucas!" She screamed again, but there was no answer. Only the water, moving in strange currents, circling like something alive. I found his lamp half submerged, beam flickering like a drowning star. Next to it lay his camera, impossibly intact, still recording. Erin snatched it up with trembling hands, pressing the playback. The screen jittered with static, but then his last moments flickered before us. The image bent, blurred, as if the lens was underwater though it had stayed dry. His breath filled the speakers, frantic, strained, rasping. Behind it, faint and low, another breath. Too close, too deliberate. Then, not deep, just the camera tilting sideways into the pool, capturing waters swirling in directions that defied gravity. The footage ended there, a loop of silence, a void echoing louder than screams. We stood in the chamber, soaked and shivering, staring at each other. No words came. My chest tightened, lungs clawing for air that felt heavier than before. I thought of drowning again, not in water, but in fear. Drowning in the unknown. The pool stilled, calm as glass, as though nothing had happened. Yet the air around us pulsed, thick and damp. Like we were breathing inside a tide that hadn't yet chosen its direction. Erin gripped my arm, nails sharp, her voice barely a whisper. "We're not alone down here." Then, from the recorder in her hand, a sound erupted shallow, ragged, unmistakably human. Breathing. Not hers. Not mine. Not Lucas's. Anymore, but someone. Something. Listening. Waiting. Filling the silence with lungs that had no right to exist. The passage sloped deeper, like a throat swallowing us whole. The walls glistened, slick and alive, and every drop that fell echoed as if we were inside some hollow whale. Its ribcage turned to stone. Lucas went first, his lamp bobbing like a buoy in a black tide. Erin followed, recording, her light shaking with each step. I brought up the rear, carrying the second camera, my every instinct screaming that we should turn back. But curiosity is a current, and it dragged us forward. We reached a point where the tunnel widened, forming a shallow pool that stretched across the floor. The water was ink dark, rippling without source, as though stirred by some deep breath exhaled far below. Lucas crouched and tested it with his boot, muttering, "Not that deep." But his words sounded hollow, stripped of certainty. He knelt, pushing the lamp forward until its glow fractured across the water's skin. I swear the reflection blinked back. Erin's voice cracked through the silence. "Battery check. Cameras at 60%. She was grounding herself in process, clinging to routine like a sailor clings to rope in a storm. But I saw her hands, clenched tight, kunoklis pale. The water was rising, inch by inch, though there was no tide here, no opening to the sea, only stone, only darkness. Lucas insisted on going ahead. "I'll just check where this leads," he said, voice firm but eyes restless, darting like fish in a net. Before we could argue, he was wading into the pool, lamp swaying, water rippling outward in perfect rings. I filmed him, my throat dry, his figure bent and distorted in the camera's screen, as if the lens itself were submerged. Every step he took sounded distant, muffled, like hearing through seawater. He reached the far side, where the tunnel narrowed again into black. He crouched, adjusting his light, squinting into the throat of shadow. Then his body stiffened. He turned back to us, face pale, mouth open. A sound tore from him, muffled, strangled, like someone screaming underwater. My blood froze. Erin shouted his name. Her voice came back to us warped, reverberating in ways stone shouldn't allow. Lucas stumbled, arms flaline. The lamp splashing into the water. Ripples spread like panic itself, racing across the pool toward us. He cried out again, a gurgling shout cut short, before he vanished into the dark throat of the tunnel. Not vanished like walking. Vanished like pulled. We splashed forward, water biting at our shins, but he was gone. The tunnel ahead swallowed light, swallowed sound. Erin's camera shook wildly as she tried to steady it. "Lucas!" She screamed again, but there was no answer. Only the water, moving in strange currents, circling like something alive. I found his lamp half submerged, beam flickering like a drowning star. Next to it lay his camera, impossibly intact, still recording. Erin snatched it up with trembling hands, pressing the playback. The screen jittered with static, but then his last moments flickered before us. The image bent, blurred, as if the lens was underwater though it had stayed dry. His breath filled the speakers, frantic, strained, rasping. Behind it, faint and low, another breath. Too close, too deliberate. Then, not deep, just the camera tilting sideways into the pool, capturing waters swirling in directions that defied gravity. The footage ended there, a loop of silence, a void echoing louder than screams. We stood in the chamber, soaked and shivering, staring at each other. No words came. My chest tightened, lungs clawing for air that felt heavier than before. I thought of drowning again, not in water, but in fear. Drowning in the unknown. The pool stilled, calm as glass, as though nothing had happened. Yet the air around us pulsed, thick and damp. Like we were breathing inside a tide that hadn't yet chosen its direction. Erin gripped my arm, nails sharp, her voice barely a whisper. "We're not alone down here." Then, from the recorder in her hand, a sound erupted shallow, ragged, unmistakably human. Breathing. Not hers. Not mine. Not Lucas's. Anymore, but someone. Something. Listening. Waiting. Filling the silence with lungs that had no right to exist. The two of us moved through the lighthouse like divers trapped in a shipwreck, kicking against invisible tides of silence. Each hallway groaned like the hull of a vessel straining under pressure, and every window was a porthole to a world of mist and restless waves. Without him, the third voice, the trio we had been, the place felt wider and emptier, like the open sea when the horizon swallows the last sail. We argued. Of course we did. Words broke out of us like waves against sharp rocks, each sentence eroding the fragile trust we still clung to. He wanted to leave. Back to gear, abandon the project before the ocean claimed us to. I said we couldn't. Not without answers. His face, salt-streaked with sweat, twisted like a rope pulled too tight. "The sea doesn't give answers," he muttered. "It only takes." Still, we carried the cameras, as though the lenses could protect us, as though recording meant survival. Down into the basement we went again, where the air tasted of rust and brine, where the stones wept condensation that ran in thin rivulets, the way water veins down the side of a sinking ship. The pool at the tunnel's mouth had changed. The water line was higher, lapping at the stone like a tongue. No tide charts explained it. The island was not connected to any inlet that could justify this rise. Yet the liquid shimmered upward, inch by inch, like a lung filling, waiting for release. We turned the recorder on, and its blinking red light reflected on the water as skin, as if it were blood pulsing beneath translucent flesh. My companion leaned close, shining a flashlight. He whispered that he could swear it moved with intent waves forming not from wind, not from current, but from listening. I told him not to say that. He said it anyway. Later, upstairs in the keeper's quarters, we found a box. The wood was swollen, the nails rusted to salt-choked veins. Inside, reels of tape, old and brittle, smelling of mildew and brackish air. We rigged the recorder, the machine whining like a whale call before it caught the track. A voice emerged, cracked, faint, yet undeniable. A farolero, the old keeper, speaking as though whispering through fathoms of water. His Portuguese was tired, broken by coughs, but the words carried weight even through static. "Hi," said Omar. "Sobe quando escuta." The sea rises when it listens. The phrase settled on us like silt. Primera repla, yet it again and again. The tape fluttering like gills in the machine. He shook his head, said it was metaphor. I thought about the waterline, the way it had crept higher. Metaphor, or warning. That night, the storm rumbled far beyond the island, but no rain reached us. The lighthouse, though abandoned, hummed as if alive, the vibrations crawling through the iron stairs and into our bones. When I lay down, I swore the mattress swayed, like a berth on a ship. Sleep came in fragments, dreams heavy with drowning. I dreamed of him, the one who vanished. He was suspended in black water, bubbles like stars around him, reaching upward but never moving closer to the surface. His mouth opened as though to scream, but instead a stream of salt poured out, sinking heavier than any breath. When I woke, the sheets beneath me were damp, as though the ocean had seeped through stone, through brick, through me. In the morning, my companion cursed. The basement had changed again. The water stood higher, now climbing the carved stones where the symbols rested. The engravings seemed clearer when submerged, as if the sea inked them anew each hour. He swore one of them had shifted, its shape no longer what we had recorded. Symbols don't move, but the ocean does. We filmed everything, but even through the lens the footage looked untrustworthy, like the sea bending light around a half-hidden reef. The water rippled, though no draft stirred, as if something deep below had turned in its sleep. We argued again. He wanted to leave tonight. I reminded him the boat wasn't scheduled until the week's end. He said we'd swim if we had to. His voice cracked. Mine did too. Yet when night fell again, we stayed. Neither of us said it aloud. but something kept us here, anchoring us like wreckage chained to the seabed. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the lure of answers. Maybe the ocean itself was holding us. At the edge of sleep, I heard water, not the sea. Outside the sea. Inside. Rising. Waiting. Listening. The basement air had thickened overnight, like water settling in a tide pool before the storm hits. Each breath felt drawn through brine and rust, heavy as a diver's lungs at the bottom of a fathomless trench. Aaron's flashlight carved a narrow path ahead, illuminating the slick stones as if they were scales on the back of some hidden leviathan. I followed, camera ready, hands shaking, heart a hammering drum beneath the hull. It was then I heard it, faint at first, lost among the echoes of dripping water, his voice. Lucas. Calling. Not the way memory recalls a friend, but distorted, hollowed, like it had traveled through pressure and salt before reaching my ears. The sound bounced off stone, twisted by shadows, impossible in its origin. We froze. Even the water in the pool stilled, holding its breath. Aaron's recorder captured the voice with eerie clarity, confirming what my mind tried to deny. Lucas was here, or he wasn't. The echo was identical. Pitch, tone, desperation intact. It came from below, somewhere in the submerged tunnel. Yet no step, no figure, no reflection betrayed its source. We descended cautiously, feet sending up tiny ripples that echoed like sonar pings in a sunless sea. The walls closed in, slick with condensation, curling like the hull of a sinking ship. Each puddle we crossed mirrored our fear, distorted images shimmering across the surface. The symbols Lucas had touched earlier seemed to throb beneath the water, their carvings sharper, as if etched by currents unseen. Aaron whispered that it felt like the tunnel was alive, aware, moving the water subtly, testing our resolve. Meadow groaned. A chain rattled along the wall. Then a railing shifted, sliding toward the pool, as though the unseen tide beneath was pulling. Objects we had left untouched creaked, spun, lifted slightly, unnervingly, the way driftwood moves along a gentle current. I stepped back instinctively, my foot splashing, creating concentric circles that raced across the floor, yet the items continued to twitch, responding not to us, but to something deeper, something sentient beneath the surface. Erin's breathing grew shallow. "Is it she whispered. Her words collided with the shadows, swallowed before they could reach the far end of the corridor. I wanted to answer, to anchor her in logic, but logic was useless here. The ocean did not negotiate, it commanded. The tunnel was not merely waterlogged. Stone, it was a conduit, a throat through which fear and curiosity flowed in equal measure. I tried to call Lucas, my voice breaking against the stone like a wave against a reef. Nothing returned except my echo, elongated and wet, yet the recorder played his voice again, soft but insistent, calling us further. The air was dense, pressing against our chests, filling our lungs with leaden wetness. We moved, guided by the impossible sound, descending into what felt like a submarine grave. The walls closing, the water rising minutely, imperceptibly, but rising nonetheless. Every step was treacherous. The floor slick, puddles hiding deeper holes, reflections splitting reality into fragments like fractured ice floating in a current. Aaron stumbled once, and the camera caught it, the water catching the light in a way that made it look like a living mirror, echoing back distorted images of ourselves. I reached for her arm, gripping, feeling the cold seep through our jackets like the chill of the deep ocean, warning us we had gone too far. And then louder, closer, not the echo, but a voice, crying from somewhere the water should not reach. It filled the tunnel, spilling into every crevice, carrying with it the scent of salt and rust, of drowned wood and forgotten depths. We realized the sound was not merely a recording, not merely an echo, but a summons. From somewhere below the water, somewhere the human ear cannot comprehend, Lucas spoke, and it felt as though the tunnel itself responded, vibrating, shifting, pulling at us with the rhythm of an unseen tide. We proceed on documenting, recording, heartbeats thundering against the oceanic pressure that seemed to coil around our ribs. Every metallic creak, every drip, every whispered breath in the darkness added weight, layering dread-like silt settling in deep waters. We wondered if the tunnel was testing us, or if it had always been waiting, patient as the sea, for its next explorers to wander too far, to listen too intently. And as we moved deeper, the water rose slightly higher still, brushing our knees, then thighs, a tide unaccounted for. The voice repeated, a call and response, one we could follow, yet could never reach. We realized, with that sinking certainty, that the lighthouse was no longer a building. It was a mouth, the tunnel, a throat. And we had stepped inside to swim with ghosts that breathed as though the ocean itself had chosen to speak. Descending deeper into the submerged tunnels, we felt the air thicken as if the ocean itself had been poured into the corridor. Each step was heavier than the last, muscles pulling against an invisible current, lungs straining under the weight of unseen tides. The silence of the lighthouse pressed in on us, not gentle, but like the oppressive stillness beneath the sea, where pressure bends metal and bends men alike. I shined my flashlight along the slick walls, the beams scattering like light through shallow waves, revealing rivulets where water seeped in, sliding down stones like tiny, merciless rivers. Aaron muttered that it felt as though we were slowly sinking, even though our feet were on solid stone. The floor vibrated subtly, a low groan running through the concrete that resonated like a submarine hull under unseen depths. Suddenly, a sharp crack shattered the tense quiet. Thick glass, old and brittle, exploded near the stairwell, spraying droplets that clung to the walls and floor like sea spray on a deck in storm. We jumped back instinctively, hearts pounding, the sound echoing as though it had traveled through layers of water, multiplied and distorted, and then finally settling in the dense air around us. Each fragment glittered briefly, like stars submerged in a black ocean. The water in the pool below rippled violently, though no breeze stirred. My stomach twisted as if pulled by currents from a hidden riptide. Something moved beneath the surface, large, massive, yet elusive, like a whale gliding just out of sight. Its form was dark, undefined, and the shadows it cast warped the ripples, the edges of the pool shimmering with a life of their own. I whispered Erin's name, but she was frozen, eyes wide, staring into the dark liquid, sensing the same impossibility I felt. Chains rattled, corrugated pipes groaned, and metal fittings shifted along the walls, as if the lighthouse itself were bending under the pressure, a living vessel about to be claimed by the sea. My camera, held out in front of me, trembled slightly. The footage later would show the subtle sway of the hallway, a fluidity that defied physics, like filming through water while standing on dry stone. We advanced cautiously, each step measured, each breath a labor. The pressure wasn't only in the air, it seemed to press on our minds, squeezing thoughts, twisting perception. Every shadow became a lurking shape, every echo a whisper from beneath the water. The sense of being watched was unbearable, a weight heavier than any stone or water line, as if something in the depths was aware of us, moving with intent beyond comprehension. Suddenly, a reflection caught my eye. For a split second, the camera recorded an enormous pair of eyes, gleaming weightly in the dim flashlight. They were the size of dinner plates, alien, watching, then gone, leaving the water smooth and silent again. The rational mind screamed hallucination, but the body responded with primal terror, muscles tensing, spine arching. We were intruders in a domain not meant for humans, yet it felt alive, sentient, ready to pull us into its cold, unseen depths. Aaron whispered, voice barely audible. We can't stop now, can we? I could only shake my head. To stop was to invite the unknown closer, to let the unseen current decide our fate. The tunnel stretched ahead, darkness pooling like an abyssal trench, drowning. USA in each metallic clink, each drip, each breath sounded amplified, as if the tunnel had become a giant conch shell, the ocean itself whispering secrets we were never meant to hear. As we reached the next junction, the water level seemed to surge slightly, brushing high along our shins, then knees, responding to no tide we could measure. The sound of something moving beneath us accompanied a silent undulation, the pressure shifting, warping our perception. Our eyes met. Both reflected the same terror and disbelief. We were not alone. The lighthouse was alive, breathing, waiting. A vessel of stone and salt, with its own monstrous heartbeat. We pressed forward into the suffocating pressure, documenting everything, aware that each step might be our last. The dark waters below swirled, reflecting distorted versions of ourselves. Each ripple was like a pulse from the ocean, a heartbeat that seemed synchronized with our own, warning us that deeper currents carried unseen dangers. The lighthouse groaned, glass rattled again, and the water shifted, a tide moving without wind, without moon, as if summoned by something far older than us. And in that instant, the camera captured a fleeting glimpse, barely a frame. Something massive beneath the water, eyes reflecting the light, watching, waiting, thin, gauny. The pressure on our lungs, our minds, the entire room became almost unbearable. We had crossed a threshold. The ocean beneath and around us was no longer metaphorical. It was real, and it was hungry. The recording began with static, a low hum like the murmur of distant waves, before resolving into movement. There, illuminated by the dim halo of a flickering flashlight, was him, our missing companion. His figure drifted through the submerged tunnel with a fluidity that defied gravity, limbs bending and swaying as if he were swimming through air. Every motion was uncanny, an echo of life twisted by water's invisible hand, and yet undeniably him. We watched, hearts hammering. As the footage shifted, the corridor seemed to ripple around him, stone walls warping as though the ocean itself pressed against them from within. His eyes, wide and unblinking, caught the light with a strange glimmer, like the eyes of deep-sea creatures adapted to darkness. A shiver ran down my spine, a coldness that was not from the damp, but from the realization that he was no longer quite human. Then the sound emerged, a chorus of voices, layered and intertwined, rising and falling like a tide. They were not coherent, not words we could parse, yet their resonance tugged at the edges of our consciousness, pulling at memories we did not know we had. Each note felt like a current passing through our veins, carrying a weight that pressed the air down around us, making each breath a labor akin to swimming against a relentless undertow. I glanced at Erin, who clutched the camera in her white-knuckled creep eyes darting across the darkened tunnel. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. I nodded, too aware of the unspoken fear, that the voices were not just echoes, but summons, a beckoning into depths that we could neither measure nor survive. The recording continued. He moved further along the submerged hall, hands brushing against walls slick with condensation, trailing fingers over the carved symbols we had first discovered days ago. There was a rhythm to his motion, a cadence that seemed guided by some unseen aquatic force. And in that rhythm, I thought I saw something else. The subtle sway of the water on the camera lens suggested a presence below, immense and deliberate, moving just beyond the frame, orchestrating his path like a predator steering its prey. Objects shifted in tandem. Rusted chains rattled, pipes trembled, and railings wobbled as if the tide had come alive inside the lighthouse. The very building groaned, echoing with a sound reminiscent of whales calling through underwater canyons. Our missing companion did not react. He moved with a trance-like grace, his body yielding to forces we could not see, forces that were no longer bound by the walls of stone and concrete. Tene pused, turning toward a point when no corridor should have existed. The camera lingered on him, capturing a silhouette that bent unnaturally, limbs elongating and folding, as though he were no longer a creature of air but one born of water, molded by currents and pressure. And beneath him, the water's surface shimmered unnaturally, reflecting eyes that were impossibly large and luminescent. Staring upward with intent, we leaned closer, our own breaths shallow, synchronized with the rhythm of the unseen ocean. The chorals of voices rose, surrounding us through the headphones, voices echoing from all directions as if the tunnels themselves were a great shell, amplifying the song of the drowned. It was then we realized he was calling not just to us, but to something older, something patient and eternal, waiting beneath the surface. summoning us into the depths we had barely begun to explore. Aaron shivered, whispering that the lighthouse itself might be alive, that the stone and steel, water and darkness had conspired to create a vessel for this ancient presence. The recording ended abruptly, static swallowing the image of him mid-step, suspended in a space between our reality and the watery realm he had entered. Silence fell, but it was no comfort. The echo of the call lingered, a tide pulling at our minds, leaving us certain of one truth. We were no longer merely explorers, documenting a lighthouse. We were intruders in an underwater domain, and the sea, in its infinite patience, had noticed. A flash of panic ignited as the waters surged unexpectedly, rolling through the furrow like a wrathful tide awakened from centuries of slumber. The faint, eerie light from the submerged lanterns flickered across the damp stone walls, revealing the swirling chaos around them. Alarms of the mind clanged like shipwreck bells as the remaining two felt the current's pull, relentless and cold, as if the ocean itself had decided to claim them. Jules, gripping the camera like a lifeline, could hear Mara's panicked gasps cutting through the watery cacophony. The air was thick with salt and fear, each breath a struggle, heavy and compressed, like diving deeper beneath the surface of a merciless sea. The Forol shivered as though shucked by unseen waves, each groan of timber and masonry echoing like sonar in a submarine, testing the limits of human resolve. Suddenly, a monstrous force yanked Mara with the inevitability of a riptide, her limbs flailing against the invisible hands of the sea, imprisoned within the stone corridors. Jules's scream collided with the roaring waters, a sound swallowed instantly by the abyssal pull. He lunged with the camera, capturing shards of chaos, Mara's hand brushing the cold wall, the glint of wet metal, the dark foam of waves rising where there should be only stillness. Bones seemed to snap against some unseen, crushing pressure, and the terror was illuminated in sudden, short-lived flashes on the camera lens. Jules's legs churned against the rising flood, his heart thrumming like a hammering hull against crashing surf. Water surged over his shoulders, dragging him, teasing him with the invisible pool that had claimed Mara. The sound of rushing currents filled every corner, a siren song of the deep, urging surrender. The Forol's foundations trembled, wooden beams groaning like shipwrecks beneath the weight of an oceanic giant. Yet Jules pushed upward, ascending staircases slick with salt and panic. Each step felt like climbing the spine of some great leviathan, each breath a bubble escaping the crushing deep. Yet he moved with desperation, propelled by raw instinct and the fragile hope of survival. The water below thrashed like a living thing, dragging Mara away in a slow, merciless rhythm, her silhouette swallowed by the shadows that moved as if sentient, currents shaping themselves around an unseen predator. The camera caught it all. Fragments of Mara's final struggle, a hand reaching, a scream lost beneath the waves' roar, a shadow that did not belong to any human form. The metallic chains and railings trembled and rattled, each movement synchronized with the pulse of the rising flood, as if the Forol itself had been transformed into a submarine hull under siege. Deep beneath the surface, Jules fought the torrent, his vision blurred by salt and fear, the weight of the sea pressing down as though the world had become a diving bell filled with water, time stretching and bending like the ocean floor in the sunless steppes. He glimpsed Mara one last time, a flicker of motion swallowed by darkness, the camera catching her eyes, wide and gleaming with an unnatural luminescence, reflecting a light knot of this world. Breathing heavily, he continued the ascent, each step a defiance against the watery oppression, each grip a prayer against the pull that sought to drag him into the abyss. Water cascaded around him like liquid iron, the Forol shaking, groaning, as the ocean claimed its due. He stumbled through the corridors, the camera still recording, every frame a testament to the terror that had unfolded, the unseen force that had turned the familiar structure into a vessel of doom. Finally, bursting through a hatch to the higher floors, Jules gasped, lungs burning as if the air itself were salt, heart hammering like waves against rock. The roar of the flood below was deafening, a monstrous lullaby, and he realized Mara was gone, swept into the living darkness of the Forol's flooded veins. Only he remained, clutching the camera, bearing witness to the drowned echoes of his companion. The Forol creaked ominously, as if acknowledging the new balance of its haunted waters. Jules pressed onward, each step upward a struggle against the unseen currents, a desperate climb away from the relentless ocean that now resided within the walls of the lighthouse. The frame of the camera captured one last, fleeting image of what had once been to explorers. Mara, suspended in the watery chaos, eyes glowing like abyssal lighthouses before vanishing into the depths. The spiral staircase writhed like a whirlpool beneath his frantic steps, each tread slick with the ocean's own sweat, salt water clinging to his palms, as though the sea itself wanted to pull him down. Above, the lighthouse stretched toward a storm-darkened sky, its apex lost in shadows that flickered with the feeble light of his camera, each beam slicing through the dense fog of brine and fear. Every creak of the old timber sounded like the groan of a ship under the crushing weight of the abyss, and he felt it in his chest, a pressure that pressed like a tide against the walls of his ribs. Water hissed and frothed at the edges of the staircase, climbing upward with a life of its own. It surged and recoiled, a serpentine current that lashed against his ankles and threatened to sweep him into the darkness below. The lighthouse trembled with the resonance of deep-sea currents, as if some leviathan far beneath had taken hold of the structure and was bending it to its will. He stumbled forward, gripping the railing as the staircase shuddered under the assault, the metal railing slick and cold like the spine of a drowned fish. Glimpses of the two figures from below flashed in the camera's lens. They stood amid the flooded floors, statues of flesh and water, eyes luminous like bioluminescent creatures of the deep. Their forms shimmered, distorted by the tides that swirled around them, each movement mirrored in the liquid glass at their feet. The water spiraled upward in miniature maelstroms, as if the ocean itself were reaching out to claim him, pulling him closer to the submerged floor where shadows moved with impossible grace. He ascended, each breath a struggle against the salt-thick air, lungs burning as though filled with sand and seawater. The lighthouse groaned again, a note low and sonorous, vibrating through his bones, matching the rhythm of the waves that roared invisibly beneath him. Above, the ceiling opened into the lantern chamber, the pinnacle of the tower, and he pressed forward, feeling the wind of the ocean howl through shattered windows, tasting the brine that clung to every surface like the scent of drowned forests. From below, the voices rose a chorus of choral-tuned whispers, echoing through the stairwell like the murmur of drowned sailors trapped in the hull of a sunken ship. His companion's transformation was evident in every gesture, a fluidity unnatural, as though the marrow of their bones had been replaced with the cold, flowing water itself. Panic churned within him like a tempest, but he forced himself onward, hands trembling against the railing, each step a struggle against the pull of the watery abyss that pressed ever closer. The top of the tower loomed above, a promise of salvation against the encroaching tides. Water surged past his knees, then his waist, and the staircase seemed to tilt beneath him as though the lighthouse itself were a vessel rolling on a monstrous ocean. He clutched the camera tighter, its red recording light a lone buoy in a storm-dark sea, illuminating the horror in quick, jittering bursts. Shadows stretched across the walls, elongated and curling like kelp in an underwater current, and he felt eyes upon him from every angle, unseen and patient as the deep. With a final, desperate push, he emerged into the lantern chamber. The wind tore at his soaked clothes, and the light of the camera caught the rising water below. The figures remained, statues in their oceanic prison, staring upward with the eerie glow of lighthouses guiding no one home. He gasped, lifting his camera, the lens capturing every trembling detaily swell of water climbing impossibly. Fast the groaning of the tower as if it were a living reef battered by storms, the eyes of his friends alight with something vast and unknowable. Then, the camera slipped from his grasp, tumbling toward the opening in a slow, terrifying descent. He watched as it fell into the rising sea, the red light flashing once, twice, and then darkness. Below, the ocean swallowed it whole, and in that instant, the lighthouse came alive, its beacon ignited, a single, powerful shaft of light piercing the night, cutting through fog, water, and fear alike. The waves that had clawed their way upward stilled, held at bay as though the structure itself now commanded them. The island breathed, alive again, harboring new guardians beneath the light that cut like a lighthouse through the eternal dark.